a presentation about archaeology, history, culture, including Rembrandt, Michelangelo, and Shakespeare, and the Bible. A long time ago, in a land called Mesopotamia, the land bounded by the Tigris and Euphrates, which was at the eastern edge of the Fertile Crescent, a man was born named Abraham. And that man, Abraham, perceived that there was one God. And that God told Abraham to go forth to the land that he would show him. Lech lecha, the Lord said. But how did Abraham know where that land was? Perhaps he had a map. And here is a Babylonian map from that time, a few hundred years before Abraham. And Abraham must have known certain things, such as the story of the flood. And here we have the Babylonian Gilgamesh epic that it records the story of the flood. The only difference between the story that we know in Genesis and this is the order in which the birds went forth and which came back and which did not. So here in the Gilgamesh epic, at the end, a raven is released and he did not circle back to the boat. In the Genesis story, the dove was sent out, and he returned. The dove sent out again, but this time he did not return. Same concept. But Abraham and his friends were farmers, and they needed to know how to set the boundaries of fields. So remarkably, we have a mathematical tablet from that time that shows what school children were learning. It essentially is the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. Look at the questions. If Abraham and his friends knew this mathematical equation, why don't our children? Abraham also knew that there was a code of law. One of the earliest codes of law. It was called the Code of Hammurabi, and here it is. It's in the Louvre Museum. But what is the difference between the Hammurabi Code and the Code of Ethical Monotheism? The difference is very simple. The laws applied to different people based upon their status in society, slave or free man. But in the Abrahamic concept, the concept all men are created equal before God. And Abraham arrives in Jerusalem, and he meets Melchizedek, the king of Salem. And here we have the first mention of the city Jerusalem, the Jebusite city Jerusalem, at the very time of Abraham. We are all familiar with the story about the binding of Isaac. To some, it is called the sacrifice of Isaac. And God instructs Abraham to go up to Mount Moriah, the place of the Temple Mount, right adjacent to the city of David, and there to sacrifice his son Isaac. This is beautifully portrayed by Rembrandt, where the angel appears to stop Abraham, as it is written, the angel came forth. Isaac. Isaac had two sons, Esau and Jacob. And there's a very interesting seal that we have from that time period. It is the seal of Jacob. It's a Semitic Yaqub, Jacob. And we are told that the Midianites take Joseph and they take him into Egypt. And we hear about the Midianites many times in the Bible. Were they a real people? And this is a wonderful portrayal, again by Rembrandt, of Joseph. And here is the Midianite shrine in the Negev that was on the land between Judea and Egypt. Abraham learned the Pythagorean theorem, it's quite possible that Joseph learned how to calculate pi. And here is a mathematical papyrus from Egypt at the time of Joseph. And here is a calculation of pi, slightly off, but very close. And there came a time when a new Pharaoh arose, and he feared the Israelites, and he enslaved them. And that Pharaoh, many people believe, is Ramses the Great. And here is his mummy. And we are told in the story that the Israelites were given quotas of bricks to make, but they had no straw. And here is a papyrus from that time period that speaks about the fact that there was no straw for the bricks. Now we know the story of the Exodus, the seminal story of from slavery to freedom. And here is a papyrus where it is written about slaves who have escaped into the Sinai desert, and they are being pursued by the Pharaoh's men. And we learn about how the Pharaoh and his men pursue the Israelites. And here is the chariot, not unfortunately of Ramses the Great, but of Tutankhamun, King Tut.